Well, welcome back to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Raven, and we're joined today by Marché Pleshette. She's a skilled leadership coach who's been a FranklinCovey consultant since 2008. Marché is the author of the book. It's going to be available April 18th. It's titled Change: How to Turn Uncertainty into Opportunity. So, as a keynote speaker and a facilitator, Marché's work focuses on things including effective communication, leadership, professional change, employee engagement and retention, and the organizational value of human capital. Marché has been the subject matter expert for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and she serves on FranklinCovey's coaching team that ensures the quality of their world-class consultants. So previously, Marché worked in healthcare, a major health system in Atlanta, as a manager of employee relations. She has a BA in mass communications with a focus in journalism, and she's a certified coach. So Marché, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I'm happy you're here. Congratulations on the almost release of the book. I hope people will go and check that out, and it'll be available for pre-order. And there's so much that we can talk about. We're going to scratch the surface of the types of things that are covered there in the book. But before we talk about change more broadly, Marché, from the different things you've done in your career, I'm really curious, what's your favorite mistake?
Yes. So this was such an exciting question. And as I know, everybody probably says there are several. Yeah. But when I thought about it, I think I would say my favorite mistake was probably my most meaningful mistake that really kind of paved how I think about life and work and professionalism, period. And it was very early in my career. In fact, it was right out of school. I had applied for several jobs, and there was one. Well, my grandmother was very close to one of the executives at a major media company. Mm-hmm. And of course, in addition to applying for different things, family members are always asking to look out, is there anything that, is possible for my daughter or granddaughter? And so her friend said, you know what? Sure, I'll get her in. She could actually start. I've done, had a couple of conversations. She can come next week, and there's a receptionist position that, she can start. Mm-hmm. And I was excited because it's an awesome company. And I'm thinking, my initial thought was this will be a foot in the door. Mm-hmm. And my father had very much sacrificed to pay for my college education. Mm-hmm. And he seemed somewhat offended and somewhat, he just thought so much of me, and he had such high hopes of his return on his investment, I would assume, that he said, Marché, you should not, this is not a good idea. Like, there's so much more. My degree was in journalism. Mm-hmm. So it was a perfect industry, right, to start with. But he said, I can't even believe that was the best we can do. Mm. That's not, you should not go to this job. And I esteemed my father so much, and he didn't admonish me. Right. But there was so much conversation about it the entire weekend. I was so stressed about it. He said, I'm really kind of offended. He didn't say this, but it was almost like he was kind of offended, mm-hmm. right? That this is what you're going to settle for, a receptionist position, and you're excited about this. So on that Monday morning, I didn't show up. Oh. I know, that's not good. Yeah. And it was because, and I, continued to look for a job. I looked for something in my field. And so I didn't take the position. Well, my grandmother's very dear friend, I would run into her periodically, and I felt so ashamed. I felt so embarrassed, and I kind of dodged her. And finally, one day we had a conversation, and she said, it was just a foot in the door. There's so much more that was possible. And it was just an opportunity. And I didn't even interview for this position. It was just like, come, get in, and, you'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. So one thing is, one lesson is like, never be a no-show. It's just not good business, period.
Yeah, right.
But that's the least of the lessons that I got out of this. I have a very good friend from college who also applied for a position. Nobody helped her. And she got an administrative support position. So she got a step in the door. But ends up at this point, she has retired from the same company as an executive.
Yeah. Wow.
And I always, it's been years, and she was on a very fast trajectory, right, from her entry position. And I always thought, for decades, really, what would my fate have been had I started? So, I always wondered, and I'm not a person who was envious, but I always would look at her with this wonder of what would have become of me, right? And so the lesson there is really and I've learned, like, over the years, I am right where I'm supposed to be. I love what I do, and I feel like I am impactful in what I do.
Right.
And one of the lessons that I learned from that, and it's so much, and we could talk more as things come up for you as I'm talking about this. But it's so interesting because what I realized and what I learned from that is my journey is my journey. Everybody's journey is very different, and my journey is richer. My life now is richer for every point that I experienced. And honestly, I don't know that I would have had as much of a purposeful life. Maybe one that was richer, like financially. I don't know. But I don't know that in that path there. And as my friend, because she ended up not really doing journalism. We were both in the journalism school. But it wasn't journalism. It was very much an executive, administrative, strategic role in one of their departments. And that's not so much my passion, right? People are my passion. And the last thing, because this is so multifaceted, but the last thing is my dad thought the world of me. And he saw something in me. He was my biggest fan. And he always saw something in me that I didn't always see in myself. And what I realized is sometimes we need a champion who believes in you. And it's like, probably, to do all over, I probably would have gone. And if it didn't work out quickly, I probably would have done something different, right?
Right.
But I'm just so glad and he's not here anymore. He passed away many years ago, in 90. But he always did see something in me. And I'm constantly reminded of the fact that you don't have to settle. It's a process. Unlike sometimes a lot of people today feel like instantly we need instant gratification. And I don't think that life works that way, but we do need to know our value. So that's my biggest mistake. And you can see all of the wheels, all of the parts of that.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you, for sharing that, Marché. And there's a lot to talk about there. I mean, a favorite because there was learning and it stuck with you. I appreciate you, sharing some of those reflections for sure. I mean, not to make light of this, but I mean, when we talk about not showing up, I mean, this was well before the term ghosting was ever used. You were an innovator or no? I mean, I'm sorry to make light of it.
I might have been a little bit of a ghoster, but yes.
Did they ever reach out to you, or you just assume like they're like, well, she didn't show up. Okay, grumble, find someone else.
It was shameful because they probably called the executive, right? Or whoever the executive had spoken to say, like, whoever you recommended or whoever was supposed to come today didn't come today. They did not reach out to me. I do remember that. Nobody reached out to me. It was kind of like dodging and hiding. After that.
Yeah. I'm guessing that wasn't ever repeated in terms of like, I mean, there's a lesson there of like sticking to commitments and the impact, like you said, if someone else makes a recommendation or a referral. Like, I would feel terrible if, somebody had recommended you to me to be on the podcast and like somehow I just didn't follow up. I mean, I would, the person who made that connection, even if I didn't hear about it directly, they might say, well, I don't know if I'm going to spend recommending people.
And Mark, as I said, everything that I just shared with you, really, this was the first job out of school, right? This is the first job opportunity, I guess I should say, out of school. it became a path and here's the thing, my father was such an honorable man, right? But it was the pressure of that caused me not to show up.
Mm,
But I am a credible person, and I pride myself
right.
on my ability to be trusted,
Mm,
right? And to be a woman of my word, to do what is expected. And so, that was one of the things, even just the shame of not being able to talk to my grandmother's friend,
yeah.
right? It's just like, I'm seeing her. I knew that it wasn't the right thing to do. And I wouldn't like that if in my role,
Mm,
um, someone doesn't show up or someone doesn't do
yeah.
what they're supposed to do. So it was a lesson, honestly, in being a woman of my word,
Mhm.
seeing things through, even if you don't think that they're going to be great.
Yeah. But you were caught between two strong desires, one to respect and honor or please your father, and then on the other side, through your grandmother. That was a tough situation. But so I'm curious then, what was your first step then into what's been a very successful career through different paths? What ended up being the first job?
Yes. So it was at a nonprofit agency. And truthfully, the job was, I think it was community affairs. It was community affairs.
Hmm.
And then it was followed by another job that was more in my field. And I always wanted to do public relations early on. My degree is in journalism with a marketing minor at the time.
Uh-huh.
My second job was director of public relations, and it was at a nonprofit agency also. I was completely directing myself, but it was a great title and it was excellent experience. Um, and then I was a regional director at that nonprofit agency, also of a particular region. And then I worked in community relations at a major health system.
Mhm.
And then I went on to be uh, manager of employee retention. And then my next step would be to be a delivery consultant and senior delivery consultant eventually here at FranklinCovey. So
Yeah.
the path, it's so interesting because they say the average American actually has 6 professions in a lifetime, not 6 jobs, but
Yeah.
6 professions. And I think that I have that. I am also a coach, a
Yeah.
leadership executive coach as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah. Well, I think there's a different expectation now compared to, I think my father's generation, there was more this expectation of, well, you pick a company and you might be there your whole career. Things happen. I mean, but my dad worked for 40 years within General Motors, lots of different roles, different jobs. It was a big enough company. It was almost like he worked for different companies, but the paycheck had the same name on it. I
yeah,
think not to make this about me, but like I switched jobs a number of times early in my career, and I think just there's a different expectation, or I was on the cusp of that transition from that maybe being a problem to maybe that just being the way it is. People now change jobs for a lot of
yeah,
reasons. Well, sometimes, look, if you're going to get a promotion at a different company, good for you. That's
yeah.
happening more.
Yeah, because I think I do think that it is a process of learning, understanding, finding the fit. And, as we'll talk about later, it's change and there's a process and you try different things in that process.
Yeah.
Very ironically, Mark, my father worked at General Motors also.
Oh, did he?
That was his entire life, professional life or work life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, So I would love, well, so one other question I was going to ask you, Marché, when you talked about your dad being a champion for you, I mean, that's really important in the workplace as well. To find a champion, or I imagine, within your career, you've had an opportunity to be a champion for others where you saw potential in
Yeah.
people.
Yes. Yes. Um, my in part, it's who I am. And I have found myself in many roles where I've had the opportunity truly to champion people, really just to help them see the best in themselves.
Mhm.
Probably my greatest experience in that have been two, and the last being the most rewarding. But when I was manager of employee retention at the health system that I mentioned, it was such an opportunity to help the organization, help leaders, to see how can you be the best leader? Because leadership really is about developing other people. It's not just about technical implementation of things.
Right.
But in my role here at FranklinCovey, it has been the most rewarding experience in that I've had the opportunity to champion people. Like we're helping organizations accomplish their goals through behavior change. And every time I deliver a course, I'm standing before, oftentimes they are leadership courses. Sometimes they are with individual contributors, but it is helping them to understand that it is absolutely possible to be even greater than you are. And I never take for granted. I think people come to development courses already having a level, they're in their positions because they're doing something good, they're doing something right. But there's this opportunity to be the best professional, the best person, because we can't be the best professional if we're not trying to be as good as we can be personally. And it is so rewarding. And I can't tell you, it's like I come across or I run into people oftentimes, and this is in my personal life as well as professionally and at the airports, and when I revisit organizations who will say, like, you said this something, and because of that, I did this. And I'm just so appreciative. And it's like, I have no idea what I said, but I'm just grateful that I have the opportunity to interact with people and to champion them and to help them see the greatest in themselves.
Yeah. Well, again, our guest is Marché Pleshette. Her upcoming book, available April 18th, is Change: How to Turn Uncertainty into Opportunity. I know within the book, you sort of talk about why change initiatives can fail or where they go wrong. But first off, I want to get your thoughts. I mean, there's numbers that you see thrown around of, that a high percentage of at least, major change initiatives, quote unquote, fail or don't live up to expectations. Does that kind of track with your experiences or observations? Is some of that maybe overblown in terms of failure rates?
No, I totally believe it. McKinsey actually has done a study that says 26% of change initiatives fail. And from my experience, it's like, I don't always see things through to know that it failed, but I can see why change initiatives take so long. And I can see why they often do. I can see how that is true and how and where they often fail. I want to make sure that I share, I'm not the only author of the book. There are 3 other colleagues. There's Curtis Bateman, Andy Sindrich, and Christy Phillips. So there are 4 of us who are co-authors of this book.
My mistake.
And no worries. So here's the deal. There's this framework of change that if we can understand it, it just makes it easier for leaders and for individual contributors to understand how to navigate through the process. And so there are these 4 zones that we talk about. It's the zone of status quo, where things are just business as usual. We can do what we've been doing. There is the zone of disruption, where things change. Maybe we knew it was coming. Maybe we did not know it was coming. Maybe something happened that just snatched the rug from beneath us, but change happens. And it doesn't matter if it's a change that was imposed upon us or one that we desired. There's always going to be this dip and there's going to be a dip in our productivity.
Sure.
And there's going to be a cost to it, right? And then if we can get enough information and understand what's changing, why it's changing, and what that means for me, then we can buy in enough to own trying. And we call that the point of decision, which is a pivotal point in the change process. That gets us to the zone of adoption. The zone of adoption is where we're trying. And we talk about the squiggly line in the book. It's not so much like, all right, so now I bought in, so we're going to just do this and it's going to happen. It doesn't happen quite that smoothly. It's a squiggly line because people try and it doesn't work what they're trying. And they try again and it doesn't work. And that, I'm sharing with you the process because that is where the change fails most often. Not when something changes, but when people try and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so that's where we really do need our leaders, and we do need the champion that we talked about before, just in my own life. That's where we need the champion, typically the leader, and each other in our teams to really help make things happen. And if we can have the conversation, the dialogue, if we can really stay engaged in the process, we can work through it. And it gets us to what we say is the zone of innovation, where we made it. But it's not just about you mastered that change. It's about understanding it's so much that might be possible that you would not have even thought about because of the change.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just so much detail in the process. I've just given you the very high level of it, but that's the process that we understand, is the predictable pattern of change that really helps.
Yeah, and that dip you're describing is something I've seen illustrated. I know, we're talking about it, and I kind of saw you drawing the chart with your finger. I mean, I've seen that illustration and that model, and I've lived through some of that where. Sometimes, or quite often, performance will dip, will get worse, will dip before it gets better. I mean, we can maybe try to minimize the depth of the dip to get us back into progress.
That's the goal, to make that dip shallower and shorter. Because the longer we stay and the deeper we go, the more it's costing organizations, the more it's costing us. And so that's the real goal. Like, it requires some real conversation. As leaders, we can't just throw out to someone, and say like, all right, convey that here's a change, make it happen. One of the things that we know is leaders, particularly like senior leaders, executives, they understand strategy. They are very analytical. They have thought about, this is a great idea. We're actually trying to grow. We're changing how we do this. Maybe it's sales, maybe whatever it happens to be. Maybe it's restructuring in whatever way it may be. But they have thought this through, and then they share with the middle level leader, like, this is what we're doing, make it happen. But it can't happen outside of our people making it happen, right? So the only way we can make that dip shorter and shallower is through a lot of interaction. We can't just convey. I always say we have to communicate. And there's a strategy to this. And it's also understanding this is very much about people. Like, so the framework is helpful, but it's not. This is what's so unique about the book. And this is what's so unique about what we're sharing. It's not just about the framework. It's about people, understanding their reactions. And it's actually 5 very common reactions that we talk through and help leaders and everybody understand. So
I want to talk a little bit about some of those different reactions, and some of it just seems very innate. But when you talk about the difference between conveying information, which sounds you're describing very unidirectional, top down, versus communication, collaboration. It seems like that change often fails because there could be assumptions that come with that top-down communication. Of, I assumed people understood why this was important. I assumed they agreed that it was a priority. I assumed they agreed that this problem we identified is even solvable. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of ways things get off track if we're not getting feedback, if we're not listening to people and adjusting, perhaps.
Yes. There's so much that could be lost in just conveying, this is what we're doing. So the zone of disruption is really dizzy. And it is so important. We can't just throw out to our team members, this is the change, make it happen, right? So when I say we must communicate, not just convey, it really is helping our team members. As leaders, we've got to get as much information as we can so that we can convey to them as much as possible, because it's dizzy, right? And as people, there are so many reactions. People are afraid, they are annoyed, they're angry, right? It's so much that's happening. And as leaders, it's important for us to acknowledge that. It's important for us to ask, how are they feeling? What ideas do they have? Is this working? Because, just in terms of, do they see how it can work? Where is it that we're trying to go? what we're thinking is going to be the path to getting there, but also let them know that we're open to whatever it is that they need. So we always talk about, or we talk about in the book, going from monologue to dialogue.
Yeah.
It's got to be a bit of exchange there, because the thing is, as long as people are there in the zone of disruption, they're uneasy, they're not as productive, not even on the things that are going to continue, right? Yeah. And here's the other thing. I mentioned that there are 5 common reactions to change, and you said you wanted to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So there's move, minimize, wait, resist, and quit. And there are advantages and disadvantages, honestly, to each of those. It's not, and that is important for us to understand as leaders. What does that mean? What do each of them mean? And because there are some things that aren't so great and there's some things that are, it's important for us to have conversation with them and allow them to know that we see value even in what might not be ready to go. To be honest with you, with move, we think that we want people who are ready to go with change, but sometimes people can be too fast, too quick to change, and they don't get all of the information, and they're ready to roll on something that's not quite what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's one of the cons to that. And minimizing, it's important for us to find out have the conversation. Because the person who minimizes sometimes doesn't even believe that this is really going to happen. And sometimes they will change, but as little as necessary. And we need, all in. But sometimes it's helpful. They can tell you why they are resisting or why they're not all in. There's weight. And I'll have to tell you, that was my bent for many years. It's like, I am a very compliant person, even as a leader. I have historically been, but I had a tendency to look to see how is this impacting others so that I can understand and orient myself on how to move forward. And so the person who's waiting is very observant. They're looking at what they feel is working and what might not be. So there's something, to that. The person who resists might be very vocal with, I don't like this. This is not a good idea. And this is why it's not.
Yeah.
And so, they're worth listening to. And all of them, and then quit. Of course, quit is the last thing. The person who quits, honestly, that's not the worst thing in the world. Sometimes a person feels like this isn't what I signed up for, and I don't want to do this. The only thing that is absolutely not the best is sometimes people quit and they stay.
Yeah.
And they just don't engage in the change.
Yeah. Right. We've gone from ghosting to quiet quitting in terms of these pieces, but
I'm here, but I'm not.
Yeah. It seems like, like that middle ground is maybe the most difficult to navigate. When you talk about minimizing or waiting, we may be getting, if you will, lip service from people, or they may be like, there's this phrase, we're going to slow walk that. Like, I think, especially in, let's say, command and control workplaces, when an executive gives a mandate, we'll look into that. Well, maybe it's very people may hope we can just sort of wait this out and we're quote unquote working on it, and then we'll get some other mandate and we can put this one aside.
Yes. And here's the deal. As long as people are thinking that, they don't indulge. And that's the part where we hope, and I may have said this already, but I think about it so much.
Yeah.
It's like our leaders know how to do a lot. One of the things that I realize in my work is that we know how to do the technical part. A lot of times the people part isn't mastered.
Right.
And that is what's so unique about this. And it's understanding, not judging any of those responses, but understanding those responses and understanding that different team members may be in different places, and understanding where they are in that framework that I mentioned before, and really having conversations. Sometimes we talk about intersection of values, helping them to understand how what matters most to them might align with what we're trying to do. But it requires conversation. It requires patience. It requires really good communication skills. And that's how we navigate people through the process. In the book, there's a really fun and a really good parable that the book starts with. And it's based on a book that we have done like prior to this that's called Who Rocked the Boat? And it is about a cargo ship that has a crew on it, and they're trying to deliver their goods. But the captain sees and hears a waterfall coming up and kind of tries to prepare everybody for this. Right. Like we're about to hit a waterfall, and everything is gonna be a mess. And all of the reactions that I've just shared, you have a team member who, and we actually have labeled them, which in reality we don't think is a good idea to label people, but they're the characters in the parable. There's move, there's minimize, there's wait, there's resist, there's quit, and then there's quit. Somebody jumps ship, and then somebody stays on, and they're just kind of like naysayers. Yeah. And they fall over, they go over the waterfall, and they're on the beach, totally off track from where they were going. And there's this reset to get this. The captain reminds them, we still have this destination that we've got to get to. Nobody knows that we're here. How do we get there? And they scale the cliff, and they break the boat down, the ship, and then they rescale the cliff. And it's not easy necessarily, but he's using everybody's creativity to make that happen. And they get to the top of the cliff, and they're back, they could do things like they had done with the ship, like put it back together. But they create something totally different, which is an airboat. Right. Like, what is that? How have you ever seen that? But that's where the innovation is. And it's such a fun parable that gives any leader the opportunity it's short, it gives anybody, and it's a part of the book. I mentioned that it comes from we peeled it out with a different book also, but it's part of this book. Yeah. But it gives any leader the opportunity to just share it with their team members. And it's such good discussion. In our preparing for the book, we tested this with teams and family members and friends. And it really resonated well with everybody, because people were going like, oh my gosh, I'm quit, or I'm resist. And this is how so it's just a fun, grounded, insightful book with great instructions and great tips and jewels of wisdom on how do we navigate change, because it's the one thing that is a constant. It is going to keep happening, and the most competitive organizations have got to figure out how to master this.
Yeah, Marché, you make so many great points here. I mean, the need to not just view the technical side of change or the logical or the rational side of change, but the emotional side. How do we feel about the change? And as an engineer with an MBA, like the bias in the education is very much towards the rational and thinking side. But my goodness, in the workplace, like respecting people means understanding that, look, we all have our emotional reactions to things, and like you said, that's not bad. That just is.
It just is.
And so the final question I was going to ask you, though, in terms of this type of reaction, like this is human nature, right? The fight or flight instinct. It's an animal instinct even. But why does change, even if rationally positive, then still tend to trigger the fight or flight instinct in the way we react?
Yes, because you just said it. It is because it is a psychological, even a neurological thing that happens when something switches from what we're used to. And it helps us in some ways, but if we can understand that, understand ourselves, understand other people, because it's human, that you just mentioned, it's like, even, I jokingly say this, but it's such a good reality for us to consider. Even if we were to win a new car, wow, you got this new electric car I'll go with. It's still going to be this learning curve. Yeah. It's still going to be, oh my gosh, we might be excited, and that's great, but it's still going to be a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of, hold on, I want to do this, but I got to get myself together. I've got to learn how this works. I've got to get some a charger for, it's
Yeah,
things that happen. It can feel inconvenient. It could feel rewarding, but sometimes we're disconnected to what the benefit is going to be because it may not be immediate. Right?
There may be a dip in your satisfaction with driving because you're uncomfortable with this new driving experience. But then if you can work through that curve, then you can get to the point where it's better, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I think having an understanding and an appreciation for that and being able to navigate, you made so many great points here about paraphrasing around the need for listening and empathy and conversation. I love the way you stated that from monologue to dialogue. So I want to thank you a lot of for being a guest, a lot of great dialogue with you here today, Marché. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been great talking to you.
No, thank you. So again, our guest has been Marché Pleshette from FranklinCovey. She is, and sorry for the mistake up front, she is part of a team effort. She's one of the 4 co-authors of the book, Change, How to Turn Uncertainty into Opportunity, available April 18th. There will be a link in the show notes for pre-ordering that. I'll link to Marché's LinkedIn profile, FranklinCovey website, if you want to connect with her or the great team at FranklinCovey. So again, Marché, this has been a real treat. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Take care.